Hey guys, how's it going? Craig Daniels and Rocky Top Splash. Summertime fishing is coming to an end, so that means we're fixing to go into the fall transition. This can be a very tricky time to find fish, so hang around. I'm going to show you my top lures and presentations that I use to catch fall bass. Alright guys, so let's start talking about how your bass in your lake are going to start transitioning from that summer pattern into fall and on into late fall. The biggest thing that's going to start happening is all your bait fish are going to move out and go back out to these main lake points. What that's going to do is going to make your bass in your lake start looking for bait fish. They're not going to be in those standard areas anymore. They're going to be scattered. And this makes fall fishing sometimes the hardest thing to do of all 4 seasons to fish. You're going to have to learn how to use your electronics and find the bait fish in your lake. My advice to you is to start on main lake points early in the fall and then transition back into the shallow water. A lot like you do in the spring when you're going to go catch those fish that are starting to spawn. Springtime and fall fishing are a lot alike. The bass in your lake are going to start feeding up for that long winter, a lot like they do from the spring when they're coming out of the winter, when they're just looking for anything that's moving and anything they can eat. Now, one thing that is different in the fall, they're not really going to be feeding on crawfish a lot. The crawfish are going to start to go back in these rocks. They're not really going to start coming out a whole lot. So that's not to say that you can't catch them on a crawdad type lure, but your #1 go-to is going to be whatever type of bait fish color you have in your lake. If you have shad, throw shad patterns. If you have blueback herring, throw blueback herring colored lures. Now I'm going to show you my top lures and my top techniques that I'm going to use from the early fall all into the late fall. And what that's going to consist of is topwater, suspended bass, and then once they become lethargic, when the water temperature goes down, they're going to be on the bottom just kind of laying there. So we're going to cover all 3 stages with a series of lures that I'm going to use. So here we go. Starting with topwater. If you have grass in your lake, do not throw away your frog yet. This is going to be the time of year where you want to change over to those bluegill or shad pattern colored frogs you have. What starts to happen is all the vegetation in your lake is going to start to break off and form these canopies wherever that grass is. That's going to draw the bait fish, bluegills and shad, into that grass, and you're going to start hearing this popping sound, just like Rice Krispies or something like that. It's just a solid pop. That is those fish feeding underneath that canopy. So anytime you come across a grass mat, pull up beside it, and if you can hear that, throw your frog. Do not put away your frog yet. Frog early fall is still a very good lure. Now, if you do not have grass in your lake, you're going to want to use 3 lures for your topwater. The first lure that I'm going to throw is if it's just early morning and I'm trying to just find fish, I'm going to start throwing around a white booyah buzzbait. This is going to make those aggressive feeding fish come out. A white buzzbait in the fall is one of my go-to lures, and I have caught some really nice fish on a buzzbait. Now if I come to the lake and it's still early morning and I think that I can still get that good topwater bite, but maybe I don't think they're that aggressive, I'm going to change over to a Heddon Super Spook Junior. This is going to let me get those kind of finicky bass that are not really aggressive. The twitch of the walk the dog of this lure is going to coerce those bass into making a large strike. Now, all you guys that swear by the water plopper, go ahead and throw that out. That's going to be a very good lure for the fall. I just feel like personally I'm going to be able to get more strikes with the action and the motion that comes with a Super Spook Junior. Now, going on down into the middle of the water column, you're going to start throwing around search baits. Yes, I'm going to use my buzz bait as a search bait for topwater, but what type of lure do you use for that middle of the water column? Years back, on up until a couple years ago, everybody was throwing around spinner baits. Well, spinner baits have kind of went off the map a little bit, and now everybody is starting to throw lipless crankbaits and chatterbaits. So my go-to chatterbait is going to be a Strike King Z-Man chatterbait. If you've never threw a chatterbait around, this is a very good lure that puts off a lot of vibration that is going to allow you to find all those feeding fish. You want to keep in mind to keep your skirts in whatever color bait fish pattern you have in your lake. Now, another good one, like I said, is the Strike King Red Eye Shad. I'm going to use two different sizes in my red eye shads. Early fall, when those bait fish are still large and pretty active, I'm going to throw around the 3/4 ounce red eye shad. This is a blue gizzard shad color. If you want to find another really good color, it's called green gizzard shad. Those are my two top performing lipless crankbaits from spring all the way through fall. They're green and blue gizzard shad and green gizzard shad. Now, what's going to start happening when that water temperature starts to go down? Right now it's like middle of summer, late summer, it's typically like upper 80s. Your water temperatures are going to start dipping back down from these cooler rains and these fronts coming in. So once that water gets down to like the low 70s, then I'm going to downsize to the 1/2 ounce red eye shad. This is just a natural shad color, but any shad pattern is going to work for me in my lake. Now, the lipless crankbait is going to show me where all the aggressive fish are that are feeding on that middle of that water column. But while I'm using my electronics, if I'm finding fish that are suspended out on these main lake points, they're right there in the middle and they're just sitting there, that's when I'm going to go to my next go-to bait, a Rapala Shadow Wrap Shad. I go to two colors. I actually just lost my other favorite color. It's carbon. I threw it up on a dock out there, and when I went up there to get it, the guy that owned the dock was raising Cain about getting off his property and all that. So I just let it land there. He probably come back down there and grabbed my jerkbait up and started fishing with it. But whatever. I'm not going to worry about that. So, Rapala Shadow Wrap Shad. This is like a chartreuse and clear color, and then like I said, the carbon. Now, why this lure is so good is because once that water starts to cool down, the bait fish in your lake are going to start to die off. So this lure, when you cast it out, it immediately turns nose down, and then if you just leave it alone, it starts to slowly sink. Now, while it's sinking, I'll take my rod and I'll just give it a good rip. It's going to cause that lure to come up and then slowly fall back down. That's going to be able to find those finicky bass that are not real aggressive yet, and it's going to talk them into giving you some really good bites. Rapala Shadow Wrap Shad. Now on into very early winter, late fall, I'm going to start throwing around one lure and one lure only. It's a jig, but it's not just any jig. It is a stand-up structure jig. Now this is a Champion's jig, and I actually ran into the guy that makes these. He lives in Kentucky. His name is Mr. Fields, and he is just a stand-up guy, and I told him that I would love to work with him and promote his product. Now, he doesn't pay me, but this is the only jig that I use in my boat. This jig is very versatile, and when it gets on the bottom, it stands up and it's going to put your trailer in a defensive posture all the time. I found that a defensive posture is going to, especially when those bass are lethargic and just laying on the bottom, it's going to talk them into giving some good aggressive bites. You can catch the biggest bass in your lake on jigs all year round. So this is my go-to lure when I feel like they're really finicky and that water temperature is getting down to like low 60s, upper 50s. I'm going to throw two colors, black and blue and a brown. Natural color brown, black and blue. Why black and blue? That's not natural. Yes, it is. The crawfish in your lake, when they start to grow and get rid of their shell, they go into a life form that's called molting. When a crawfish begins to molt, and it happens all through the year to just whatever type crawdad there is around, whatever size when they start to grow, it's kind of like a snake shedding its skin. When they begin to molt, guess what? They change colors to black and blue. That's why black and blue works so good across the form on all your lures. Now, my go-to trailers, it's going to be a Berkeley Havoc Pit Boss. That's the only trailer I'm going to be throwing in the fall. Black and blue with my black and blue jig, and either a green pumpkin or a brown for my brown jigs. Now, the motion on these is going to be very good, but it's not going to be like your summertime lures. They're not going to be real aggressive. It's just going to be kind of a slow trickling action. These trailers are very durable, and any lure that I've mentioned up to this point and here on, I'll leave descriptions in the box to where you can find all these. So just if you're interested in anything that I mentioned, just go down the description box and find that link. It'll take you directly to that. Now, for the setups of rod and reel and all that stuff that I'm going to use with each setup, let's start back at the top. On my topwater baits, my rule of thumb is anything with a treble hook, I'm going to use a medium action, not medium heavy, medium. So on my Head and Super Spook Junior, I'm going to use a 7 foot to a 7'2" medium. That's going to give me a good lightweight rod that's going to let me work it really easy without wearing my wrist out all day. The only time that I change my medium heavy rule is when I'm throwing around my red-eye shads. Now, with the red-eye shad in this lake, there's a lot of grass, so I need more of a backbone to when I get in that grass, I can rip it out. So I go to a 7'2" to 7'4" medium heavy. Now, on all my lures that have a single hook, like my jigs or my chatterbaits, I'm going to use a medium heavy, but I'm going to go to like a 7'2", 7'4". That is my go-to size, 7'2", 7'4", medium heavy. I believe it's probably the most versatile rod that you can have. Now, why I want to use a medium heavy on these single hook lures, it's going to give me more leverage and more backbone to really drive those hooks into the roof of that mouth. The medium action on treble hooks is going to give me more ability to give more of a whip and more of an action to the lures. Like on my jerk baits and the topwater spooks. Buzzbait, it's a single hook lure, so I'm going to go to a medium heavy rod. Topwater line, I'm going to use 14 to 17 pound monofilament. I don't want to use braid because I don't want to have the monofilament has kind of a play in it. So when I give a good hook set, it's not really going to rip that lure away from the fish. It's going to give it a split second for that fish to take that lure. Now, on my frogs all year round, all the time, 7'2" to 7'4" heavy action, not medium heavy, heavy action with 50-pound braid. My jig rod is a 7'2" or 7'4" medium heavy. Now on my jig rod, I make sure that I have a split cork grip rod. Now why do I want to use a split grip cork? Well, if you use a EVA foam grip or even those new wind grips, that's going to take away the sensitivity that you can feel through the cork. The cork is very light and very dense and allows you to just be more sensitive. So I recommend on all your jigs and like your Texas rig worms to change over and just try out a solid cork grip or even a split cork grip. Now a lot of the rod companies, they're going to tell you that that's why they use the blanks, so you can put your finger right here and feel it on the actual rod. But if you don't want to hold your rod like that and you're holding it by the grips, you're going to be more sensitive using a cork handle. Now your frog rods and your topwater, it doesn't matter, you can use the lower end EVA foam and you can go to the wind grips. Those grips are not really designed for sensitivity. But if you're worried about sensitivity, I advise you to change over or at least try a cork handle rod. You'll be surprised at how big the difference is in those grips. Now you guys if you guys have been following me, you may have noticed where I have joined Team Ardent. Now I have been using the Ardent Rods for quite some time, and I had just recently changed over to try out the Ardent Reels. I had never used an Ardent Reel up until about 2 years ago. I really wasn't sold on the Ardent Reels because I really enjoyed my loose reels. But after I have changed over and used the Ardents, I like using the Ardent Apex tournaments. Those come in a 6:5 to 1 ratio, and I used to just say, well, I don't want to, my fast action reels, I don't want to go below a 7. But the way rods are and the way reels are these days, the gear ratio, they've really come a long way in the amount of line that they can take up. So a 6:5 to 1 in 2017 is actually taking up a lot more line than a 1990s model whatever. So it's the same gear ratio. So the 6:5 to 1 in Ardent is still a very good ratio for me, even on my fast action setups. The Ardent rods, I absolutely love the Denny Brauer Edition Pro Series rods. If you guys have ever followed Denny Brauer, he's a professional angler. He is on the Strike King team. He works really close with Ardent in designing these rods. These are a very good rod. They're very solid. They're lightweight. They're very sensitive. They have a fast tip. They're durable. So now I exclusively use Ardent rods and Ardent reels. So far I have been very pleased with the Ardent rods and the Ardent reels. So here is a good look at the Ardent reel. Just a solid black with some gold trim. Yeah, it's a 9-bearing system. I will leave a link to their website. Go check out all the stuff they have. They have low end bait casters all the way up till, if you're a saltwater guy, they got saltwater rod and reels, and they have their highest end reel is what's it called? Ardent Grande, and I think its retail is like $200. But I use the lower end Apex tournaments. Very good solid rod and reel for me to use. I typically, that's kind of where I fit in at, just middle of the road, not high end but not really the cheapest stuff, just a good mid-grade rod that you can get out here and beat up and still haul in some good sized fish. So guys, that about wraps up for today. I hope I've introduced you to some good techniques that you can use and get out here on the water and put some fish in your boat in the fall. Remember, just get out here and find the bait fish. Number one thing for fall fishing, get out here, find the bait fish, and then determine what kind of mood they're in. I recommend starting out with a search bait, either a chatterbait or a lipless crankbait. And if you know it's going to be a good topwater bite, get out there, throw around that buzz bait, and watch your water temperatures. Once your water temperature gets down to 60s, start throwing around slower presentations. Start throwing that jig around. Check out Champion Jigs. You're really going to like those stand-up structure jigs. I know I do. That's the only jig in my boat. I swear to you, that's the only jig I use. Once you guys hook a couple fish on those jigs, you're going to see that they're made with quality and they're a good price. That's it, guys. Subscribe to the channel. I appreciate it. Let me know what is your guys' go-to fall presentations. What do you use when you're out here in the fall? Get out there on the water, fish simple, simply catch fish.